Kelly's trying to educate folks on what it's like and how they can affect change, how they can change that embedded culture. And I work for government, and we have a lot of courses on DEI and such. And most people, unfortunately, just look at them as tick the box and then go back to normal life at work. The status quo is comfortable, and nobody likes to really step out of their comfort zone. But with this, we have to. Like, you look at the statistics in our industry, I think we're up to 19% of the workforce in forestry are female now, which is woefully low. When I go to speak at post-secondary institutions, the classes are about 30 to 40% female, which is slowly increasing each year. And you see these graduates, where are they impacting the numbers in industry? A lot of them start work for a few years, and then they think, this is not for me. It's too difficult. We're too still treated as females not capable of doing the work. And yeah, they're hitting that cultural wall in there that it exists. Whether anyone wants to admit it or not, it's there.
Hey folks, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. My name is Matthew Kristoff, and on this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. Now, today's episode is all about justice, equality, equity, and inclusion. Today, we are talking all about forcing a culture shift. We're talking about helping an industry that we all depend on and need to challenge itself to grow and become even stronger and solidify itself as a leader in sustainability and societal change. Today is about how do we promote the forest industry culture of the future, the ultimate in diversity and inclusion. You know, one that will power innovation and motivate other industries and countries and municipalities, whatever, to do the same, to be leaders in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that will just change our world, right? Make it a better place to live in for everybody. Today, we're going to learn why we need to make this shift, the importance of it. We have personal stories from people in today's episode about just how harmful not doing it can be and what we're missing out on. And we can also figure out how to make that shift. We're going to talk a lot about how. So, unfortunately, we also have some very recent accounts of bad things that have happened to people. Bad leadership, poor management, and just bullying mentalities. To have that conversation, brought on somebody who is well suited to talk about this, Kelly Cooper. For years, she's been helping leaders and organizations transform workplace culture through social intelligence. She also developed and leads the Free to Grow in Forestry initiative, which is the DEI initiative for the forest industry. She's here today to tell us her story, which unfortunately is a sad one and a disappointing one. She was brought in to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion, and was a victim of all the things that she was trying to work against. So she's here to tell us her story, not in specifics and details. The point of this isn't to point fingers or anything like that. This is just to tell us what happened to her, and so that we know what to look out for and some of the hurdles that exist and how big they are and how it's going to take a culture shift to change them. We also brought on Greg Herringer, who's been on in the past. He is a forest professional in BC, and he is the current chair of the Canadian Institute of Forestry, Vancouver Island section. He has some personal stories in the forest industry that will open your eyes as well and provide some context. And we're here today to learn. We're here today to move forward. We're here today to, again, try and create the ultimate in sustainability. And that means we need the ultimate in innovation. We need diversity. We need more voices. We need more ideas. and we need to be able to say them openly without fear of judgment or bullying or the hurdles of institutional culture. So, sponsors for this episode, West Fraser has been with me since nearly the very beginning, and they are the number one sponsor for 2025. Without them, this would not be possible. So thank you, West Fraser, for all of your support over the years. It has been fantastic. I really appreciate your willingness to let me have the shows and conversations that I want to have. So thank you very much. And Greenlink Forestry has also been with me since the very beginning. Could not do this without Greenlink. Thank you, Greenlink. Now, without any further messing around, let's dive into this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion with Kelly Cooper and Greg Herringer. Here we go. Thank you to both of you for taking the time to come on and talk with me today. And I've had a couple of episodes in the past that were about diversity and inclusion and that kind of thing, but I feel like it needs a lot more attention, first of all. And second of all, today's conversation is much more real. I know that going into it, it's much more real. It's much more tangible. There's real examples of why this is important and why it needs to be brought to people's attention. I'm looking forward to the candid nature of this conversation, and as challenging and heart-wrenching as it might be, we're going to get into it. So, Kelly, I want to start with you. Before we get into all of that, let's learn a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into diversity and inclusion world.
Okay, well, first let me say thank you for having this episode on your show. It's important, like you say, and I appreciate the commitment to getting information out and a discussion going for everyone to hear in the sector. Mm-hmm. So back to your question. So I have been working in the sustainable development space now for 30 years, starting with the environmental side of the equation, as I call it. Mm-hmm. And that was really an area where I was trying to educate corporate on the value of the environment. This is going back some time, right? So in the 90s, when we really didn't appreciate the value of the environment for what it is. So I was talking to them about why it's important and how there's an economic return by protecting it. Mm. After about 20 years in that space, and I was doing things in the public and private sector, I wanted to understand the social side of sustainable development. So I pursued my own business at that time. It's now been about 12 years to look at that. I wanted to research, well, what is it? Because at the time, there was a lot of money flowing out to organizations to say, support a community on advocating for themselves in an environmental assessment process. But there was nothing returning. So with research, I realized there's actually the same kind of parallel with the environment. There is a return on your investment by investing in your people.
Right.
So instead of looking at it externally so much, it was more internal. How do we invest in our workplace so that we get a value or a return on that investment that betters the bottom line? And ultimately, if we have environment and social underway in this capacity, we've achieved sustainable development, which was the vision back in the 80s when the whole concept of sustainable development started. So why did I get involved in it? Well, first of all, I was interested in understanding that social side. Secondly, my whole career in natural resource sectors, science background, always in engineering or in that space, male-dominated sectors, I was exposed to a lot of harassment, opportunities that perhaps were curtailed, let's say, issues that we're going to talk about today. And that drove me to wanting to solve that.
Yeah.
So I could talk about it all day, just that question. I'll leave it at that.
I believe that. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly, for that. I appreciate you sharing that. I know that's going to be, a conversation we're going to have today. That's for sure. Greg, I want to know what brought you here today. What is it that's motivating you to, step out and stand up for this idea of diversity and inclusion?
Well, Matt, to answer that, we're going to have to go back in time 30 years to when my wife at the time and I decided to adopt 2 children from Haiti. And we had thought that Canada was a very welcoming, inclusive, multicultural landscape that these infants would be welcome into. It was a shock to find out how closed-minded most Canadians were on Vancouver Island here.
Wow.
Very white society here. We brought 2 Black children in, raised them up here, and as they grew up, we saw how they were treated by society in general. One incident that stood out was my wife took the boys to the pool one day. They were like 2 and 3 years old. They're sitting in the hot tub, and this old white guy's in there lounging with them. He goes, "So, what are you going to do with them when they grow up?" And that was just shocking. Yeah. And all those little incidents that carried on as they grew to the point when they would walk home from high school and the police would stop to ask them what they were doing there. Just because they were 2 Black children on Vancouver Island.
It's being profiled.
Yeah, exactly. And so that sort of opened my eyes to, our culture isn't as far along as we would like to believe. And then when I entered the workforce in forestry in particular, it really shocked me how much racial comments were accepted, homophobic comments were accepted, and people, if you weren't white, Caucasian, middle-aged male, you were marginalized completely. So I was put in touch with Kelly through the Canadian Institute of Forestry and the DEI leadership team, where I'm now the sitting chair for it. And she really opened my eyes as to how this is a really embedded culturally within the industry. And I thought, this has to change. And that's where I've allied myself with Kelly, and we're working together to affect change here.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. Like, and to your point, like, I think as a white man, like my life, my worldview, my perspective, the way people treat me is fairly linear. Like I'm not being profiled. So like to me, I'm like, everything's good. We're doing great. And I could totally buy into that idea of being unaware. Right? Because I'm sure I am not aware of just how bad it is for minorities and just, just a woman, right? So I understand now, I think. I shouldn't say understand. I can try to understand. I'm beginning to understand. I'm beginning to try and empathize here and just be open to the idea that this is so much worse than we like to think it is. And so and I think that is the problem ultimately in the end, I think, for the whole industry, right? And for our culture in general, for Western society, is that there is so many people in power that are not exposed to this type of harassment and this type of exclusion and being treated unfairly. And those are the people that are in power, and they're just not, if they're not aware of it, how are they supposed to do anything about it? Or it's just plain straight up racism and sexism and all that kind of stuff too.
But we don't want to put those labels on ourselves because we sort of abhor them when we see other people displaying that behavior overtly and think, that's not us. But
totally. It's easy for me to have rose-colored glasses, right? And I can sit here and go, I think I'm optimistic. Like things are good. Life is good. We're going well. And but then you talk to Kelly and you're like, well, shit. And it paints a very different picture. And I think unless we're able to share these stories honestly, and your emotional state, Kelly, and the hardships that you've gone through, I don't think we're going to be able to move forward, right? We have to be truthful with ourselves and accept that change is needed and that we can't be afraid of it, right? So it seems to me like there's a lot of conversation around diversity and inclusion everywhere. Right? It's being talked about all the time. There's lots of words. Clearly, from the story that Kelly's going to give us, it sure seems like it's still just a checkbox. Would you guys agree with that? It's just one of those things that we've got the training and we check the box and we're good to go. We can move forward.
We were on a trajectory for some change, positive change.
Sure.
And if I can just speak to a couple of things you mentioned, I'll get back to your question. First of all, what I would call what is going on, what you guys have described, is something we call invisible privilege. it's something where you don't have any idea, that there's an issue going on. It's like a great example is someone walking through a park at their lunch break on Whitetail, enjoying the birds, having his own thoughts, taking a break, really rejuvenating during his lunch break. Comes back to work, meets a female colleague who's done the same thing, but instead of having that opportunity to listen to the birds and reflect on their own thoughts and rejuvenate, they've had a guy following them and tracking their path or making a comment. And their whole break of restoration has been interrupted. And frankly, it's just not the same. So when you take that kind of perspective back and you're like, oh, didn't you just have a break? It's like, well, I did, but not fully. That's the difference of a good example of invisible privilege that people don't quite relate to if they're not in those shoes, right?
Totally.
So that's something that I'm ignorantly unaware of. Like, I never even would think of that in the previous years, and that I just would blithely go about doing what I do and never having to consider that. And when you bring that up, it makes me look back and reflect and think, wow, I really need to do a lot more introspective thinking on this.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think we were on that journey for doing that with the Free to Grow and Forestry initiative, and still happening. But I think the root of isn't so much that the executives don't necessarily all see that there's a need for it. They may. Some of them may. I'm not going to say everybody's the same. What it does come down to at the end of the day is about power and control. That's where people get antsy. If their position is threatened, if their control of the narrative perhaps is saying something they're not comfortable with, or the pace of change itself is at a rate that they're not comfortable with, they're going to push back.
Right.
And if you do any deep reading on this topic, it does ultimately end up in that box of power and control where things get ugly or can get ugly. It's beyond sort of ignorance and arrogance. I used to joke, I did a post on that. I said, my AI issues for me is more about arrogance and ignorance than it is about artificial intelligence.
Right.
Because people are just not aware to a certain extent, or they know and they're just like, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's clear from your story that that's the case for sure. So you mentioned Free to Grow. So let's get into this a little bit. What is the Free to Grow campaign? Free to Grow in Forestry, and just a brief kind of how you got into it, how it was going, and what it was about. Yeah.
Sure. So I was first doing work in the space with the mining sector, actually, in the Harper era during 2014 to 2017. I sought funding through the government, federal government, and received that funding. And we ended up working with an organization in mining to implement a 3-year initiative on a national action plan to increase the number of women in senior roles in technical positions in mining. It went very well. We didn't get as far as, those were difficult times with this topic, but I managed to bring together private sector firms, and we worked on that initiative together with the idea that they would take those into their organizations. It ended in 2017, as I said. On the heels of that, the forest sector approached me and they said, would you do something like that for us? So I said, of course. But of course, I learned so much already. I was like, I want to not just have private sector. I want to have public, private, not-for-profit, Indigenous, and academics across the sector, as much 50-50 male-female as we can get, and as high as we can get in seniority. So that's what we did. So instead of going, I also wanted it to be a partnership with an organization in the sector, as opposed to me on my own as a consultant. So I approached the Canadian Institute of Forestry, who I didn't know prior, and they were excited about this idea. And they had a funding vehicle called the CIFSEEK project, and it allows private sector firms to go through them to access government money. And in return, the CIF gets a cut of the contract money. So in this case, say 15%. So when the funding came through, I said, we should do this together in the sense of a facing of the project. But the work ultimately ends up with the private sector to run. That's how it is with all other CIFSEEK projects. They have many of them, and that's how they work. So that's how it started. And we set up this great advisory committee back in 2018. And together we identified the goal similar to mining and pursued creating a national action plan. And at the end of that 3-year initiative, we had branded the initiative Free to Grow in Forestry and created a website and put all the reports we had created over that period of time onto it. And we were beginning to start communicating out about what we were doing. During that first 3 years, we created 3 cutting edge reports on how to, it was all in the how to's. And at that time, everything was about the what and the why of this topic. Why do we have to care?
Yeah.
And what does it mean?
Yeah.
But at that point, there was nothing about the how to become an inclusive leader, how to overcome resistance, how to become an effective ally. So those are the reports that my company undertook to do and contributed to that 3-year initiative. And that was a national in scope initiative. So it was all about national engagement. On the heels of that wrapping up, we were told to keep going. Like, this was really effective. A lot of people are into it. Let's go. So I was actually a little tired at that point, but I got the nudge from CIF and I proceeded and we got the funding, which was great. And the purpose of the second phase was to go regional. So first phase, national in scope, second, regional. Let's get into the sector in the regions themselves. And the goal was to create online training modules of those 3 reports. So we can start actioning these things. So as I used to say, it was vision to action in phase 1, action to traction in phase 2.
Sure.
And so the idea was, let's create some training modules that really work for these people. So I created 2 executive leadership teams, one in the East and one in the West, comprised of 20 executives from industry along the supply chain, the regional associations, industry associations, ADMs, assistant deputy ministers in the provinces, and that, yeah. So that was it's like a full court press.
Yeah.
40 executives.
Yeah.
Great. I would say 95% were men.
Yeah.
Why? Because I wanted the senior level folks, as we talked about, I wanted the leadership to understand the mission of this work and to own it and to learn it and feel empowered and confident with this topic, to understand the value proposition and why this is important to their business, how they can make a return on their time with this, and to really make a positive impact, both in their company and society, frankly.
Yeah. How do we make this world a better place? Yeah.
Right. So everyone was excited. Like, if you go to the Free to Grow site, you'll see presentations we did. And, we had the group were very excited about what we were doing. And a lot of positive momentum was in place. And so I'll just leave it there for now. I've been doing a lot of talking. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe at this point, I don't know if the audience you're reaching to, Matt, is familiar with what the CIF is, the Canadian Institute of Forestry.
Good point. Yeah,
because I'm quite often quite astonished when I speak about the CIF amongst my peers and colleagues, and sometimes you get those blank stares like, what's the CIF? What? You don't know what they are? Yeah. But it's the Canadian Institute of Forestry, and it's been in existence for over 100 years. And it's essentially a group nationwide of forestry professionals who have a common goal to advocate and educate the greater public about what we do and what we're all about. Because there are no real strong voices for forestry nationwide. There are individual ones provincially, but we're the voice of forestry professionals across the country.
Right.
And that's when I joined that over a decade ago. That was my conduit to the DEI issue in forestry. I was always aware of it, would see examples of it as I was working, but the CIF seemed like a logical choice to advocate for that. And they created a DEI committee, and they put out a call for members. And I thought, well, this is a great vehicle to sort of get my voice out there and advocate for change within our industry. And that eventually put me in touch with Kelly, and here we are today.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'm usually pretty good at picking up on that jargon that people are going to miss, and I appreciate your help in picking up on it because I totally missed it entirely. So yeah, thanks, Greg.
So now the big question is, Matt, are you a CIF member?
I'm not. I have been in the past. I'm not today. Doesn't mean I won't be in the future. Just, Yeah. But yeah, the CIF has amazing resources, right? Like there's all kinds of workshops and webinars and stuff that I do often listen to, and I just pay full price for, like an idiot.
We appreciate people like you paying the full price, Matt.
Yeah. So CIF is great for that. Lots of really interesting of stuff in there, right? So let's get into the meat of this. And from the meat of it, from your story, from what happened with you and all the hardship you've been through, we can try and learn something. We can try and get to the bottom of some solutions and where the problems are, and try and motivate some people to get involved in some way or another, even though it may be uncomfortable, it may be difficult, it may be challenging. It may be a lot easier to just sit back and go, well, that's a big problem. It's not for me. Right. So let's get into this story about what happened to you. First of all, you are the diversity, equity, and inclusion person in this situation. You are driving for the change, and you have this wild story of discrimination and just being pushed out for unclear reasons.
It wasn't very inclusive, shall we say.
Yeah, we'll say that. It wasn't very inclusive. And so let's dive into your story. What happened to you and what drove you to want to speak out today?
Well, I would say that what happened to me was a living lab of the teachings I was trying to get across to the people in the sector. Mm-hmm. So what do I mean by that? I mean, all the things that I was trying to teach, like inclusive leadership, I was met with, let's call it traditional leadership. I was teaching to be an upstander. What I got was a lot of bystanders.
Right.
I was teaching how to overcome resistance on the basic levels of how we get resistance shows up in the workplace. You get diminished and you get sidelined, all kinds of things, which is all, by the way, in the training. But I experienced a next level of resistance, and that's the power and control aspect that I mentioned at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I didn't expect that. But I'm basically a living lab of what was intended with the work.
Right.
And it's all going to be in my book that I'm putting out this fall. So I guess we can start with, so there's politics. And right now we have to be mindful of the context we're in North America with this topic. It's a mess, right?
Yeah.
It's all driven from the South, huge impact on Canada. And then sectorally, it puts a lot of people off the hook. They're like, oh, great. No, we don't have to deal with that.
Sure.
It was so messy, right?
Right.
But what I was trying to do is and I did this through the process of the first phase of the project. I wrote a book called Lead the Change, The Competitive Advantage of Gender Diversity and Inclusion. And the reason I wrote that is because I could see quite clearly there was a gap in the leadership levels of understanding this in common sense way, and talking to them in their language, which is the language of money, to explain the value proposition of the social issue. And then it gave a blueprint for how to take action. So the book was a big piece of explaining this whole thing, and it got the attention. It got more than attention, frankly, than I expected, but it worked. Point is it worked.
Yeah.
And so we were creating momentum. Okay. And these 40 folks that I talked about before were engaged. They were on board. They were wanting to do something.
Yeah.
And after about, let's say, after the first year of the second phase, when we're in the regional scope, beyond the scope of the work that we had agreed to doing together, suggested we create a communication strategy. And everybody bought into it because it was like, okay, we're going to do all this, but we should be communicating this out. But the project funding that came from the government didn't have the money for that. So I said, I'll write up a proposal. And if you guys are interested, we can do this. We just need we need to throw in money to it.
Yeah.
So I wrote the proposal in June that year. And by September, a lot of money had come in to support it.
Yeah.
And people were obviously engaged, right? Yeah. Like they were signed up. It was a volunteer initiative. They have put additional funding in to support this communication strategy. I even went so far as to, I kind of thought over the summer, I was getting some indicators that something was a little funny. So I thought, I'm going to get an ally into the project itself. And I found a guy who was willing to be an ally with think of him as an interlocutor to the guys
Mm-hmm.
and me. So it was like, if you have any issues
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't addressed or anything that you think you can't comfortably talk to me about, here's a guy in the middle who was willing to be that person.
Okay. First of all, it's pretty disappointing that you needed that.
Right.
First of all.
Okay, thank you.
But second of all, I guess if that's where we're at, we have to meet people where they're at and make it easy for them. You don't make things easy for people, they're not going to do it. So I appreciate that you recognize that and made that happen. Anyways.
Troubleshooting all things in advance, right?
Yeah.
Trying to avoid the snakes,
Yeah.
trying to get just the ladders.
Yeah.
So yeah, this person was in there, and people were all excited. They're like, Kelly, somebody's got to do this, and you've got a handle on it, and you're passionate about it. You should be doing this. This is good. The Ally guy, he was excited and part of it. After the phone call ended, he called me up right away. He's like, Kelly, this is so great. I'm so excited by what you're doing. I'm not going to charge you for my time. Because, of course, the government grant is peanuts, right? It's not enough money. And so to do all that we had in mind, so, it required support from others. And so he said, I'll do it for you pro bono. So I was like, perfect. Okay, this is excellent. And so that's how much energy, I guess you could say, came from that call. So anyway, everything was great as far as I was concerned. As far as the Ally was concerned, we were humming along. I got all this additional funding in for the communication strategy. And then 6 weeks later, I attended the Forest Week annual event and went into that meeting to speak with folks there. And it was like some people thought I was a ghost. I could tell that people were like, well, what is she doing here? And I could tell that there was something had been discussed. But I thought something's up. And it was within that week or so, it was soon after anyway, that I received a very hurried phone call from an executive in the region that said that he and a number of other people were now pulling out of the project. And I said, well, why? Well, I can't get into that. So, well, what, can we meet with the Ally person? No, we don't need him. And I was like, well, this is crazy. So that was a very short call. And of course, I was confused. I was not understanding what was happening and why.
Mm-hmm.
I subsequently got a letter that outlined that, and they had gone around, and I was very transparent with my whole process. I'm giving everyone contact information. Like, here's the people on your team. Here's their email addresses. Anyway, I guess they had gone behind the scenes and called everybody, so there was no paper trail, to convince them to follow their lead in another, quote, another direction. So the letter was quite, well, Kelly, you did great work. We're really great doing things for the sector, but we're going in another direction now. Thanks, bye, sort of thing. And I was like, okay, how do you explain 40 volunteers? Now, not all of them left, but many did. And it's because they were, in my opinion, they were pressured, right? Like it's sort of a pack mentality in the sector where they follow each other. And I understand that to a certain extent, don't get me wrong, but the fact that nobody questioned it and nobody contacted for more information seemed really strange. Like a very coordinated, intentional effort was put into undermining this initiative.
Well, the question is why the secrecy? Why the all of a sudden, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like some people might look at this and think, oh, this is a business decision. And like that's all that is. And it's like, okay, it was a business decision, but why? Why the secrecy? Why the change?
It couldn't have been that.
Totally,
if it was a volunteer initiative,
right?
You contact the person that you signed up with this about, and you say, I'm stepping away because of whatever.
Yeah, totally. That's my point. Is why the secrecy? Why the all of a sudden? Why the? Anyways, sorry. You continue.
Yeah. Well, of course, I tried to reach folks, and some people did share some things, and it was a coordinated effort from the senior levels to take it over.
Yeah.
And I think they expected me, and they silenced people from talking to me. And then, wasn't long before people weren't following me on LinkedIn, and it's a huge impact. And I subsequently learned a lot of undermining of my reputation and business has been circulating ever since. And even so recent as but it's not long ago. I actually had, and this took a ton of courage, hire a lawyer and send a cease and desist letter to stop the undermining and horrible stuff that's going on. Like it's unbelievable.
So to be clear, it's not just that you lost this contract. This is that there was a continued effort to undermine you and reduce your capacity to make money and to put yourself out there in the workforce. There was something nefarious almost.
Yeah. So what I ended up doing after the dust settled was I am familiar with how the government works. And I've entered 4 names into an access to information request with the federal government because I didn't lose the contract. The contract was with the federal government.
Right. Okay.
But what I uncovered through that ATIP were about 80 pages worth of communications. And I know as part of that were phone calls as well, made by 2 people I know for sure in the sector at senior levels that made efforts to contact these folks and about Free to Grow. Now, these folks had no business contacting a federal department about this project. Again, it was a volunteer initiative, and nobody came talking to me or the CIF if they had concerns. Now, the normal people, in my opinion, would come to the individuals and address what their concerns are or issues are.
Let's be adults about this. Yeah.
Right. So, of course, the government folks contacted me and the CIF to ask questions, and we answered them, and everything was legit. But we were put through some paces to defend our project and what happened and all these sorts of things. So that was very unpleasant. And as part of that, it was efforts were made to pull the funding completely. And I think divert it to a competing platform that's subsequently been made. So it was a shock of the lowest behavior. Like I say, it was so low, it was looking up at low. So yeah, I mean, coordinated, definitely. Undermining, 100%. Like again, like I say, all the things that we were aiming to address with the project were on full display with this project.
Yeah.
Now there is a backstory too that needs to be shared so that we are open and transparent. And that's where I think Greg at the CIF might be better to address or raise it so that we have all the information out there for anyone to listen to. So when I first started this project in 2018, my husband had just retired from the federal government, and the executive director of the CIF had left abruptly in April of that year. This is now a year and a half, let's say, prior to the project timeline of things falling apart. And they were looking for someone for about 8 months and were unsuccessful with doing so. And by then he had retired, and he was looking for something else to do with his time. And I said, you can do this job and do such a good job at helping these guys. But I thought they're never going to do that because I'm running into one of the biggest projects they've ever had. And there's, perceived conflict of interest.
Right.
So anyway, after, to make a long story short, they did hire him. And they
in
said,
full
don't
knowledge
worry,
of who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't worry, we're going to put a process in place. The president of the board will be an annual rotation person who will be the co-chair on the Free to Grow initiative. And there will be no problem. We sent out a letter to everyone on the advisory committee from phase 1. So that included all national organizations, as well as everybody else on the committee. Everybody was very aware. Nobody was hiding anything. There were no covert ops. Okay. And there were processes in place, like I just described. Plus, there's a third party and overlay of that with an auditor who reviews the books of the CIF and can confirm there's no conflict of interest. So the president would be the person signing my checks, because that's the flow through of money, monitoring my reports, what have you, completely independent of the rest of the organization of CIF and how it's run and by whom it's run. So I'll leave it at that from because I think that was pre-Greg world knowing, but now Greg, you can take it from here.
That's sort of the background of where I entered the scene and recruited to the DEI committee with the Canadian Institute of Forestry. And Kelly had allowed us to be guinea pigs with her beta version of the Free to Grow, or the modules she had been building. And they were excellent. They're well received by everybody on the committee. And our committee is, as one would expect, very diverse. Persons of color, a couple old white guys like myself on the committee, people of various sexual orientation. So I think we represented the broad diversity that exists in the forest sector, whether people know it or not. Mm-hmm. And Free to Grow, it was my real introduction to the whole Free to Grow initiative. And I thought, great, this is what we need. And then our chair of the committee stepped down because of perceived notions that there were wrongdoings happening. Mm-hmm. And when I stepped in as acting chair, and unfortunately, I was given the runaround. Like, it was all told, you don't need to know what's happening. You can just move forward. Don't worry about it. We've taken care of everything in there. Not knowing the background, there was that perceived conflict of interest between Kelly and her husband, who was our executive director. And to make a long story short, I'm what people call patiently persistent and persuasive. And I finally got a person to come and address us on the committee, and it was still very evasive. And when you get receiving evasive answers to questions that are fairly direct, like most people, you assume the worst because you want the truth. The truth never hurts. What you lay out.
No, exactly.
It tells a story you can understand. You can learn from mistakes or perceived mistakes that were made and move forward. Mm-hmm. So that's where I came in direct contact with Kelly, because I wanted all sides of the story here. I wanted the whole rounded picture. Mm-hmm. And as in speaking with Kelly about the whole background, what's happened there, I'm just shocked at how a group of 40 volunteers could suddenly about face and abandon what seemed to be so promising. And then the whole negative campaigns that seems to be directed at Kelly, it was shocking. And it's so far out of my world that people would do that, because I like to believe the best in people, that we're all in this together to do better everything. And it caused me to do some soul searching. Like, did I even want to be part of this? Did I want to continue on as chair of the committee? Would it be easier just to step down and let someone else shoulder the burden? But then I thought, no, you committed to this, carry forward, and let's see what positives can come out of this. And after many conversations with Kelly and the folks on the committee, it seems that the best thing to do is remain in place and move forward. And that's what I've committed to do. And you look at the broader context of what we're trying to do, and you look at the culture in what's happening to the south of us, what almost happened to us in Canada with our federal election. We're in a very precarious position with the whole DEI initiative. It could collapse overnight, as we've seen down with the Trump administration. British Columbia narrowly avoided that. We had an opposition who was running on removing all this DEI stuff. We had a federal campaign where a certain party wanted to remove woke culture from academia, and it just showed how fragile it is. And it further made me think, okay, stay the course, Greg. Stay where you are, because that's the best you can do. And I had conversations with Kelly thinking, like, I'm a baby boomer white guy. I'm the guy that's sort of in management of everything. We control a lot, and we do. And maybe I'm not the right face for this. But as Kelly pointed out, other white guys will listen to you. And those other white guys are those industry captains, upper management. So I thought, okay, I can do that.
And that's exactly what the point was of recruiting those guys to the project. That was, I tripped on an invisible wire, as I call it. I've now done a lot of learning about this kind of dynamic and what can happen and the psychology behind it, which is really the essence of the issue of why. A lot of these guys, they're reliant on senior people to tell them, is this the right direction to go or no? And if they say no, they all just go. They're not focused on this topic. They're reliant on those relationships to tell them and direct them accordingly and to direct them properly. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't always happen. That's what, you can be in a position of influence and power, and it can really make or break things. Yeah. And those folks have an agenda, and nobody knows of it, they just keep it within a couple of people and they do whatever they want to do, and nobody's the wiser. And I think at the time they thought they could just kick this into the gutter when they did what they did. And it did the opposite for me. I was more determined than ever. I could not believe that these guys had the chutzpah to do this with a volunteer initiative. Yeah. And to go to the government. I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, no scruples. And I thought, I am not lying down on this.
I was just going to elaborate on the education part, is what Kelly's trying to educate folks of what it's like and how they can affect change, how they can change that embedded culture. And I work for government, and we have a lot of courses on DEI and such. And most people, unfortunately, just look at them as tick the box and then go back to normal life at work. Right. The status quo is comfortable, and nobody likes to really step out of their comfort zone. But with this, we have to. Like, you look at the statistics in our industry, I think we're up to 19% of the workforce in forestry are female now, which is woefully low. When I go to speak at post-secondary institutions, the classes are about 30 to 40% female, which is slowly increasing each year. And you see these graduates, where are they impacting the numbers in industry? A lot of them start work for a few years, and then they think, this is not for me. It's too difficult. We're too still treated as females not capable of doing the work. And they're hitting that cultural wall in there that it exists. Whether anybody wants to admit it or not, it's there.
Yeah. In Kelly's book, she mentioned that you mentioned that there was like an average of it was 3 or 5 years that a woman spends in forestry and then gets out.
Yeah, after the first 5 years, they decide to go because of workplace culture issues. Mm-hmm. And within the sector, we do have a group that's dedicated to supporting women in the sector, and that's great. Yeah, this is a complementary thing, which is really trying to get to the meat and potatoes of why women don't stay is the workplace culture issues.
Yeah, you need the support, like the colleague support and the societal support, but you also need the institutional structure, which is what you're working with, to get these things moving in a sense that the institution is changing as a whole, not just being pressured. So yeah,
and I think it's a testament to how effective it was going that it got that reaction, right? Because we were moving the status quo. And well, I think it's important to set the stage on what this issue is all about. So about 8 or so years ago, the federal government of Canada identified the forest sector as being one of the hardest sectors to shift workplace culture. And we knew when we set out with Free to Grow that we were going to work on that part of the equation. Mm-hmm. But it was about how do we address these workplace cultures, which are both seen and I would say unseen. So just that piece alone, just to give perspective. But then as I was going through the work, I came across a respectful workplace policy that apparently most forest companies in the West Coast have. And it spoke to all of the things that I would say are the hidden or the shadow bullying and harassment behaviors that go on. And of course, if there's a policy made, it's because the situations happened so many times that it warranted a policy. Mm-hmm. So that helps to gave me a lot of perspective that, hey, it's not just me. This happens all the time. But what those were, which was very interesting because it all happened to me, were they had this great box with all these things. It speaks to abuse of authority, interference with performance of work, and destruction of workplace relationships, among other things. But those are the three biggies. And within the destruction of workplace relationships, what really caught my eye was a subsection called mobbing. And that's when one individual decides that one person is a target and they maneuver everyone else to be against that target. So, of course, when you hear the word mobbing, you think of the mafia and you think, holy cow, what is this? This is crazy. This is what happened. And since then, and when I've spoken at different events, people have come up to me who've gone through that. One woman in particular was hospitalized. Now, the reason I'm able to bring this up is because I am an independent consulting firm and I don't work for these folks. But like that woman, she worked for these folks. And it's traumatic. It's traumatizing. Like your whole lack of trust erodes your self-confidence, your self-worth, the fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's designed to do. And they basically want you to leave, right? And so for some people, they're not in a position to leave. They need the job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really super hard. For me, it was super hard because I thought, okay, you're not going to, take my job. It's my company. But what they essentially tried to do by contacting the government, where the funding came from, was to try and essentially stop me working in another way.
Mm-hmm.
So they just exercised their usual tactics in a different way. And I mean, it was completely out of bounds to be going to the government before. Like, nobody came talking to us, right? Come to me if you have an issue. I went through a process of airing are there any issues? I mean, I put in the ally in place. They knew him. They could have easily gone to him. They could have gone to the CIF. They did not choose those options. And there's only one clear answer as to why. Because they wanted to run it themselves, or they wanted the power and control, whatever. It was not done, what I would say, professionally by any stretch. But my point is saying that the policy shed a light on these are the toxic workplace culture behaviors that go on all the time. Mm. Now, folks in the forest sector are not familiar with it because, frankly, I think it happens at senior levels. Most foresters are out in the field, right? They're doing their thing. They're separated from it. So they rely and they trust these folks to be behaving in a way that is ethical. And this is a big deal.
And ironically, that was the exact policies that you were sent there to try to eliminate. Like the exact type of structure that you were trying to get rid of. And then you were a victim of it, which is baffling.
Yeah. So I'm there to teach inclusion and I was excluded. I was there to teach allyship and I got stonewalled with the pack mentality. I was there to explain how to overcome resistance to this topic. And I got the biggest form of resistance possible, which is people at the highest levels wanting power and control. Now, that may also be a sign of the fact that this was getting tracks. This was a threat. They didn't want the change. They just didn't want the change.
Yeah. Terrible.
So when it's sad, because obviously people beneath them wanted the change. Yeah. And I think they still think that this is possible. I think they just want to do it on their own.
Right. Yeah. And I think in their own mind, there's probably other rationale for all of this, right? There's probably in their mind, you know what I mean? In everyone's mind, they're the good guy, right? They're the hero of their own story and they'll have rationale for this and that and the other thing. But at the end of the day, right now, we have discrimination and you experienced literally all of the hurdles that you were teaching and showing and trying to build structure to avoid, to remove, right? You experienced all of those hurdles and all of those barriers. And it's like, if you can't get this DEI thing moving forward, then who the hell can? Like, what are we supposed to do here? Like, I feel it's very strange. I think it's easy to sit back and not take a stand and be comfortable and just not say anything. And so I think
what I hear is people always saying, oh, the forest sector is never going to change, Kelly, never going to change.
Well, see, and I was willfully ignorant of the fact that I thought we were heading in the right direction. I really, really did. I thought things were going well. And then people that have told me, like women in my life who are in the forest industry, they haven't said anything about it. And then I asked them, I said, oh yeah, I heard from this Kelly person that this is all really, really bad. And they're like, oh yeah, of course it is. It's terrible. And you're like, really? Why have you said anything? It's like, well, because that's just my reality. My reality is my whole life has been that resistance and barriers. And like, this is not special. This doesn't stand out as unique or different to me. And I'm like, holy shit. So like, this is just their norm. This is just your normal life. And you take it for like, not granted, sorry, but you just accept it so much. You've come into this society accepting the fact that it's going to be harder for you for whatever reason, because you're a woman, and just move forward and try to make ends meet. And it's, so I really want to know from a personal perspective, right? Like, let's bring this down to you as a person with emotions and, you know, a reputation and expectations of yourself. And I want to know how you've been coping with all of this, because I got to imagine it's been overwhelming.
Yeah, it was really hard. It was severe. Like, I was in shock. As I'm saying in my next book, like, you know, I couldn't believe that this was happening. And there was a point, like, when I got that rushed phone call where I was over in a couple minutes, but it was went inside my living room and my son was there. At the time, he was about 18. And he's like, hey, what's up? And I couldn't even talk, which for me is saying something. And I just sat there. I think it was for about 45 minutes. And he just pulled up a chair and he just sat with me. And I finally said, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed in men. Like, yeah. I'm so disappointed. I couldn't stop saying it. It was like, how could they not be human about this? How could they not work collaboratively? How can they not talk? This is crazy.
Yeah, it's clearly seen through a business lens only, and not like,
Oh, I don't even think the individual who was, I would say, the front man to do the job, I'm not sure he was completely aligned with it. He was executing orders. Mm-hmm. The behind the scenes of that is that, of course, as I said, they try that whole operation of being that way creates a feeling of mistrust, which can create paranoia, which has definitely happened since. I'm working through that, who you can trust. Your reputation, of course, is really important as a consultant. What else do you have? But everybody has their own history of trauma. You know, when I lost my brother to suicide, it was about 20 years ago now. That's a feeling of you're not good enough. You know, they've gone, they've made a choice. You weren't enough for them to stick around. Now, is that a valid thing to feel? It's not, probably, but it's how you feel. So when something like this, where I've invested so much energy and I thought enthusiasm, everything was going well, then you're made to feel like in a nanosecond that you're not even good enough to talk to about this. And so you're done, right? So all those old wounds, I think it's like ripping a Band-Aid off, and you're faced with all that again. So it takes a lot of time to repair that psychological damage, not to mention economic security. Like, I was now defending myself with questions that I shouldn't have to.
Right.
It's totally interfering with the work at hand. And that doubled the energy required to keep going. But I was so pissed off. I was so mad that somebody external thought that they could dictate my company. I was like, who are you? Like, stay in your lane. It was so wildly obnoxious. So anyway, it took a long time for me to digest how low people can be.
I'm sorry you had to experience that.
Yeah,
it's disturbing. I think what I want to do is, you had this brutal experience, and obviously it's been emotionally challenging. Like, you've gone as far as to hire a lawyer to protect your reputation and you know, try and not be permanently damaged from this situation. So what is the story that you want to tell here? How do we want to get out of this? How do we want to, because I don't want to just tell the story of this terrible thing that happened to you. It's like, how do we solve this? Because to me, it sounds like it's leadership. But I feel like the problem of leadership, of poor leadership or emotionally unintelligent leadership, it's almost inevitable, right? Because those are the people that are driven to those roles. You know, people that want to be the boss, they want to be in charge, they want to run the show. So anyways, I'll leave it to you to provide some solutions here. Like, how do we move forward out of this? How do we affect change so that there is actually true movement in the DEI space, and we don't continue to see, or at the very least, we see consequences, not for whistleblowers like yourself, right? Not for people like, why are people that are pointing out discrimination being cast as the bad guy? Like, we all look at Edward Snowden, right? We all look at Edward Snowden. He's like, oh, he's a bad guy. And you're like, Edward Snowden was showing you corruption in your society, horrible, terrible corruption. And you're like, oh, he shouldn't have done that. There's a bad guy. And, and it's this wild thing. In every movie you've ever watched, he's the good guy. He's the guy you're cheering for. You're like, this guy's going up against the bad entity, the bad structure, the bad institution. And so right now we have all of these, like, you're experiencing monumental, life-changing impacts and resistance because you're standing up for yourself and just asking for fairness, right?
Yeah, right now I just want people to leave me alone. I would just
you don't even want fairness.
Alone.
Just leave me alone. Stop bothering me.
I just want to run my business. Okay. I should be allowed to run my business.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But that's not happening.
Yeah, what is needed in my view is like allies, folks like me and others like me that can work within the industry, and we see this on a day-to-day basis, and gently point out to folks that are displaying sort of overt discrimination and educate them, because a lot of them are just blissfully unaware that they're doing anything wrong. What an example that comes to mind, Matt, is a former partner of mine who's now retired. We'd be driving out to the cut block and you're calling on the radio, your position, and suddenly this female truck driver comes on the radio and she's at kilometer 12, whatever. And it's like, you lit this fuse in my partner. What's she doing out here? Women shouldn't be driving trucks out here. That's a man's job. And I was sort of taken aback, and it would lead to a long discussion. But
I'm sure it was more colorful than that too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And every time we heard her on the radio, the same reaction, no matter whether it was a week later, a month later, and we'd have lots of discussions about this, but it was, that attitude was so ingrained that it's difficult to change. But after a couple of years, he started to come around. And I would give the whole backstory of this lady. She has a daughter in the school in town my wife works at, blah, blah, blah. And she became a person to him, not just this female truck driver.
Totally.
And that's where you have to get that idea in there that everybody out there is a person, no matter what their sexual orientation, skin color, sex, they're all people. And that's what people have to start to look beyond the surface, ask those questions. Yeah. So the more folks like in the industry that are doing that, then we can start to nudge that change that Kelly's so strongly advocating for.
Totally. Like, I think just the simple, when I've encountered open discrimination in my life, not towards me, but towards, other people, or even just offhand comments that are racist or sexist or whatever. Yeah, simply by, you don't even have to get upset about it. You can just go, well, that was a messed up thing to say. Like, just pointing out that what you said was, I think a lot of people that act that way, they're really not exposed to the idea that that's not normal to talk that way or think that way or to have those ideas, right? They're surrounded by people that all do the same thing. And so there's just not the exposure to recognize the harm they're doing. And like I said, most people, I would say almost everybody, right, is the good guy in their story, right? Mm-hmm. They have justification for everything they're doing. But when you point out that they're saying something overtly racist or sexist, I guarantee you they might get defensive in the moment, but they're reflecting on that later. And it might not go well for you, but they're reflecting on it. And if you keep at it, you just be like, hey, I don't appreciate that. That wasn't very thoughtful. Like, just little things like that. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to make a stink about it. I mean, that'd be good. I think it's good to make a stink about it. But I'm just saying, for people who are introverted and maybe aren't that, don't want to stick their neck out there like that, even just little things like that, like mentioning it, would make a huge difference.
Hey, right? I'm not comfortable hearing that.
Yeah, just a simple comment. Don't get confrontational, because that can usually backfire. The walls get even stronger and higher. But a little comment that will make them hopefully think, whether it's at the end of the day or the next week, that's when they'll start to oh, okay, yeah, maybe.
We want reflection. We want
Yeah.
reflection. We want people to just
Exactly.
think about what they're saying and the actions that they're doing,
Yeah.
how that impacts other
It's
people.
awareness, right?
Get them to step outside of themselves and put them in that other person's shoes. And like, how would you feel if you were made a negative comment towards you? How do you feel?
Yeah.
And
Isn't it wild that trying to build empathy in adults is such a problem?
You know what? I just put out a post today that Empathy Day is June 12th.
Okay.
I thought about this the other day. I was like, wouldn't it be great to have an Empathy Day? And then I Googled it, and there is an
There's an
Empathy Day.
There we
and
go.
it's June
We should
12th.
celebrate it.
So, FYI.
Okay.
Yep.
But just to answer your question too, I think what you said, Greg, is excellent. Like, we do need more allies.
Can I jump in for a second?
Right.
I want to alter the term you used. Use the word allies, and I have recently come across a better term that I think
please share, Matt.
holds us more accountable. Okay, so through helping produce the Good Fire podcast with Amy Cardinal Christensen, she exposed me to a gentleman, and I'm terrible. I forget his name, but he pointed out the idea in the Indigenous realm of accomplices, not allies. And there's a paper out there called, I'll link it in the show notes, Accomplices, Not Allies. And it's in the Indigenous context. But the whole point is that we don't need people that agree with us mentally, because that's what an ally is. Someone who, oh yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense. An accomplice is someone who does something about it, right? An accomplice is somebody who takes action and puts themselves on the line to try and make that change. They believe in it so much that they're willing to step out of their comfort zone and risk their own situation, go to the rally, and that kind of thing, and be a part of it. And that podcast, I wasn't a part of recording it, but I was a part of producing it. And as I was listening to it, it hit me in the feels so hard, because I was like, oh yeah, like I can definitely relate to this. There's so many times in my life where I'm like, academically and mentally, like my values and my ideals are with this, but what the hell have I done? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, this is a shift in how we think about it. We're going from, I agree with that, to being like, I agree with that and I want to do something about it.
It's like we need a whole new word, because to me, accomplice has a certain connotation. And
I know it has a bad connotation.
Exactly.
It does.
Yeah.
It has a bad connotation, but you're right. We almost do need a whole new word, but
yeah,
I think
language is important.
It is.
It's
so
important.
I know. I totally that's how I felt. But I think that was the point though, right? I think that's the point, is because it gets your attention, right? Like, I don't want to be an accomplice. And it's like, no, but you're going to be an accomplice to something good, to positive change. And so, but yes, I agree with you. And we could get into a whole, theological debate about about that word. But I think that's my point, is that it needs to be allyship with action, right?
Well, that's exactly the name of one of the training modules. So thank you, Matt. You just stumbled on it.
Nice.
But that's what it's called.
This wasn't rehearsed at all.
This was not. Bingo.
That's funny.
Well, just to answer your question myself, what can we do in this what could we be, promoting in this circumstance? I guess what I say beyond the allyship is individual thought. So don't be always saying, following the pack. Think for yourself.
Totally.
Think, this doesn't make sense. We were on this track. Things were good. What happened here? Even if somebody's telling you something, challenge it. Challenge the person telling you. Go to the person who, like, for example, to me, go to the CIF. Go to the ally who was created for the project. You had tons of options.
Yeah.
Then going to the government. Okay, so that's first point. Second point I would say is take the training. It is effective. People who take that training, I'm telling you, they have that paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It happens. Not happening quickly enough, because they did what they did. They've now stained the reputation of it all. This podcast and other things I do to try and speak truth to power is to try and open people's minds on this.
Yeah.
And say, hey, this is helpful. If you really have a commitment to this topic, this will help you.
Yes.
I had someone take the training, by the way, who was with that group that left, an underling guy. And I got his feedback. I'm like, he thought it was great. I said, can you give me a testimonial? He's like, I'm sorry, I can't, because, we're doing this. I said, this is crap. Like, this is clearly, like, People should have free thought to do what they want. They should be allowed to go to different places for things. How is this possible? This is insane.
Totally.
So there's that. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, because this is a piece of what's become quite evident to me now, and it's not just in this circumstance, it happens a lot elsewhere. It's women who have issue with other women. So they feel threatened. Some of them, and especially in the male-dominated sectors, have worked very hard to get where they are in that male-dominated world and have become male-like, but they are cloaked in a female body. And so when they see other women, they are wanting what they have, or are wanting to make sure they don't get the same, like they don't get their limelight taken, or whatever their issues are. There's a bunch of them. I've done a lot of reading about that and talked to a lot of other women about that. That is definitely a piece here. And it's a problem. And if we really want to break from these dynamics, we have these few women, and people are like, oh, well, we have so-and-so in leadership positions. Okay, great.
But look at
that's one person. It's like everyone likes to point to Margaret Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's ancient history, though.
Yeah.
If we had, I would say the opposite, 80% women in positions of power and 20% men in positions of power, how would decisions be made? How would people resolve conflict?
I can tell you right now that you made so many people uncomfortable by suggesting that. So many people listening would be like, 80% women running. Like, just they would have a gut reaction to like, oh. And all of a sudden, if you
imagine the shoe on the other foot,
the tables have turned. Like, I think that's the way to think about it, though, right? To bring it into context.
Well, I think that's a shock to send, but I think the better way to look at it, or the future way to look at it in my mind, is to have male and female at the top. And there's accountability for behavior. Like, how could this have been avoided? People could have come and talked to us. Let's start with the basics of professional
Let's go with transparency.
Behavior.
Yeah. Let's treat people like people. Yeah.
That's how I know there was covert ops. You're asking, how do I know? And these people have their own ideas or justifications. Their justifications are not honest, in my opinion. They can't be. Anybody who really was sincere with wanting to make progress would have used the processes we had in place, or the individuals. Like I said, there's an ally they could have talked to.
Yeah.
The fact that they ignored that option blatantly and chose this path, and subsequently now we have a competing platform. I think we have enough information here, plus all the deets from the background and conversations and such. I'm sorry. It's bad news. It's a bad news ending. Could it have had a different ending?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But now it's getting even kind of crazier. It's like stuff is still going on. And like, okay, I'm not going to go the distance on getting stuck in battle of legal stuff. That's not my energy. That's not my energy being. Okay. It was more to say, just stop. Just stop. You know, people are aware, people that they think are supporting this stuff, they're uncomfortable. They're in the middle. They thought they were doing the right things. They were following, but then they're like, I don't know who to believe anymore. It becomes like a Donald Trump moment, right?
Well,
there's fake news out there.
Totally. The truth is obscured, and there's these pressures, and nobody really knows what's going on, and you're not sure who's at the bottom of it and what's happening. And it's this, I'm sure it's a mess. And like you said, like, yeah, people they're comfortable where they're at. And I don't know. It's hard to get out of that funk, right? When you're like, well, I could just ignore this and go with the flow, and my life would go on, and I could be okay. Or I could speak truth to power, and it would be a problem, right? And there's that fear.
Well, I think that's the bottom, is the fear. It's a fear-driven environment that all these guys are dependent on contracts from their people, and they're involved in their association, is involved in that association. Like, there's too much incestuous dynamics that, if I can use that phrase, it's too small of a community. And so as a result, you can really do what happened. You can have a coordinated change of direction.
Yeah.
But nobody's prepared to speak up because it's just not in their best interest.
And the fact that forestry is such a small community, there's no room for several groups trying to do the same thing when they could be working together to create a better one thing.
Well, that would be my point, because some people might think, hey, it'd be
100%.
good for us to have multiple resources out there, and you're like, sure, that's fine from a business standpoint, whatever. But are they the same thing? And is one getting more support than the other? And why is one getting more support than the other? Is one more rigorous and one less? And which one is getting the support? and that kind of thing, right? So I think people might, some people might get the wrong idea and think that like, well, this person's just jealous that their thing didn't take off and somebody else's thing did. And it's like, no, this isn't the problem. The problem isn't the business. The problem is the personal. I try to think about all of the angles when people might be listening to this, right? To try and just speak to that. And the problem here is the terrible communication, the mistrust, the clear, like you said, covert ops of some sort, and there's just this weird stuff. It's disgusting that you had to go through this and continue to go through this and experience this. Let's keep talking about solutions, right? And how we get through this, because that's the bigger issue here is, okay, this is the problem. We know this is happening. We know that this terrible, not to minimize anything that you've experienced, Kelly. I know this is horrible.
No, it's fine. I'm fine now.
I definitely want to focus on how do we move forward? How do we actually do this, right? Because I feel like you said there's this leadership problem, but if at the end of the day, leadership has the final say, how do you break through that barrier?
So to answer your question, for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to say I'm not sure. There are things I can't even say I'm thinking of doing or
right.
have done, because people intervene on that successful opportunity. And I've literally, like last fall, for example, I went to the World Forest Congress last year in Sweden, and Free to Grow was recognized as the world leading initiative on this topic. So you get that internationally, but in Canada, it's like Neanderthal land, right? If you go carrying on,
that's offensive to Neanderthals.
Yeah, right. Carried on the fall, got an award for this work in the sector, and gave a presentation on what happened, so people understood. Went to YourForest presentation and did a bunch of things. But all I'll say is I could never say in advance what I was doing, what's coming, because I feared intervention, because that was happening with other things. I was getting cut off at the pass.
Yeah.
Mysteriously.
Yeah.
People walking away. I had someone about a month ago, Greg was copied on this email, said they wanted to remove their logo. They're not from Canada. And I thought, from Free to Grow, and I thought, well, why is that? So I wrote back and I said, I'd like to speak with you about that. There's been some undermining of the initiative. Crickets. So there's things going on behind the scenes that are, like, I would say it's movie level material.
Yeah, it's very strange.
But all to say is I can't speak to what I could, because I think that will be thwarted.
Sure.
I know that's crazy, but it's
let's
the world
word it a different way then. You have been involved in so many high-level functioning working groups, right? From the United Nations to all kinds of different stuff. I don't even remember the list that you had. I listened to your book, and you're talking about all of these amazing things that you've been able to accomplish with, global kind of problems and with multi stakeholders and just like getting the collaboration and the dialogue going so that you can move forward together as a group. What are the ingredients for that next level thinking and innovation? That's
an excellent question. And I would say it's the governments that I should have had on paper. That wasn't perhaps nailed down tight enough. I was operating with a goodwill. I was operating from the first phase of it going well to assuming that we were on that track.
Well, if all you're getting is positive smiles and let's do this, let's go this, like you can't possibly know that you're going to be stabbed in the back.
I didn't expect to be tripped.
Yeah, totally.
I didn't expect those invisible lines to be tripped on.
Yeah.
But if you were to do stuff internationally, and that was one of the things that was pointed out in the beginning of Free to Grow, is that, people were giving me a lot of accolades. Kelly, do you believe you got all these different people around the table? This is excellent. I was in phase 1. And phase 2, I remember distinctly at our first meeting in the West, one of the guys there, he's like, Kelly, I don't think you realize what you've done here with bringing all these different people into this room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my point. Fresh set of eyes has value.
Yeah,
I didn't
totally.
know the politics of the sector when I started this. I didn't know people in the sector. I did what I thought made sense. I used a change management model to affect a social change in the sector. A change management model is about building that awareness, creating the desire for change, which we certainly did. Then it's about the knowledge you need to impart, the abilities you need to learn, and then the recognition. Out of the course of this whole project, we would have achieved all that. We got to awareness and desire to make a change before we got the rug pulled on that part. Now, having said all that, project's still going on.
Right, there's still
And right now, frankly, we're still in, what we need to do is disseminate. We need to get people these tools. These
Right.
are effective tools. Want to know what to do? Take the training.
Right.
People think I'm going off making mad money, or as my kids say, mad bank. I am not. Okay. We need some funding to A, maintain these training modules, and B, to do more. It's it's not a stagnant topic. This is always evolving.
Totally.
It requires supported funding to do that.
Of course.
The funding for these things is so small. It's like competitive with others. It's easily attained within a training budget. There's no excuses. No excuses. But if we really want to make change, we have to take it. And that funding will then support the advancement of the topics. Like I said, there needs to be a deep dive on women undermining other women or feeling threatened with women. That's another whole subject area that needs attention.
No, it totally diminishes the subject matter when people, if people try to make it just about money, right? Like, oh, this is just about money, right? It's like, it just diminishes the whole, it's an easy scapegoat. It's a really easy scapegoat, right? It's all about money. It's like, no, we're talking about, do you really think it's about money? When, like, if people could step into your shoes for a moment and just try to empathize with what you've experienced and the hardship that you've, like, and there's much more to this, obviously, that we can't get into, but if they were able to empathize with you and step into your shoes for a second, you would realize that if you're that person who's been treated that way, it's not about money. It's about what's right. It's about justice. It's about empathy and equality and doing the right thing, being a good person. It's about those values that make you a good person, right? And that is always going to supersede money. At least in my mind, it does. Anyways,
100%. That's what my next book's all about.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know where to go from here, because I feel like does it all come down to just like creating emotional intelligence and psychological safety in these organizations? Is that all it really is? Is just making people that?
Well, the diversity at the top would actually make a difference too, right? So if you think about if there were more people that were outside the sector that came in the sector with a fresh set of eyes like I did, and they're like, what, this happened? First of all, they need to know what happened, right? But they just need to be aware. We don't need details. We just need to know, this can happen. That's all we need to end it with. This can happen. Be aware and make sure you kick the tires on decision-making that seems a little suspect. Find out really why. Go to the source.
Yeah.
Find out real
what's the motivation here? Yeah.
Like Greg did. Greg did that, right? He's like, this doesn't make sense. I gotta find out more. I gotta, be curious, be proactive. Don't just be a bystander and think that there's something called authoritative bias. And that's exactly what's happened here. People in positions of authority are believed just based on their position of authority. That doesn't mean they've got the right agenda. So it's important that people think for themselves. They see something fishy, they ask questions. They don't just say, oh, well, everyone's going their way, I have to do that. No, you don't. Do you really want to make a difference on this topic? Or do you want to be part of your friend group? Like, are we in grade 3? Or are we professionals? And I actually think the other piece of this, to answer your question, is that having this training embedded into the RPF program of code of ethics, code of conduct.
That's a registered professional forester program. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be also systemically impactful.
Yeah.
So that people understand this is part of my ring. I have to have a code of ethics here that includes this aspect. And I'm obligated. I'm accountable. This is what the ring represents, as well as all the other stuff.
There is holding yourself to a higher standard. And so we start pushing into that social intelligence basket of skills that are desperately needed in a way that can't be ignored. Like when I looked at what happened, I was like, I went, what's the standard here? Associations, like let's just, for example, an association's policy for what if the problem is at the top of it? I looked it up and it was like, if anyone has a problem, go to the top. Go to the top.
It's like, well, what if the person at the top is the problem?
Yeah.
So there's no accountability, right? It's just a bunch of moving shells.
So what's the answer to that? I know you said you don't know, but like
accountability frameworks. You need accountability frameworks at the top.
And what is that? How does that work?
So you would need to create, like it to my mind, but I've obviously given this some thought, like some frameworks at the top where if you have a situation like this that's questionable, the board, for example, if it's an association or a company, it has a board, whatever structure they have, they need to be given that option for being aware of this without it ruining this person's reputation. Because we're not trying to get the guy fired or the woman fired. It's like, we just know this is a thing that has happened. Now, maybe because of their history, maybe their upbringing, maybe their own issues, this is why they are who they are. They've become bullies or whatever. They need a little time out. We're not going to fire them. We need to
Where's
make
the
sure
cone of shame?
We're not going to fire them. We don't want to make it that scary. But let's just recognize we need a process in place to make sure that these folks can have a little training that's needed. Sometimes people do this for other reasons, for coaching, right? For leaders. It's not unusual, to be honest.
I think you're right. There's an expectation that if you're the leader, you're infallible. You've got it all sorted out. And it's like, that's just a person. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And arguably, like, as we all know through, the reality of politics, generally speaking, the people in power should never be there in the first place because they're not the right people for the job. But they get there anyways, and that's never going to change. But how do we hold them accountable, right? And like that accountability framework, that makes sense. Like, how do we, but it's this weird cyclical thing. We're like, okay, so if we create a framework where the person above is accountable to the people below, like how does that, we're not used to that structure. We're used to the top-down structure. We're not used to a cyclical structure of power. And that's a new idea, but I like it. It's interesting.
Well, with some of the larger companies like, say, MasterCard or Visa, some of the big companies I drew from, for examples, for the Inclusive Leadership Report that subsequently has become the Inclusive Leadership Training. Mm-hmm. So I've strengthened it even further. These companies operate in a way that is much more in that vein. They have employee resource groups, I know, which are specific groups, but there's mechanisms in place that they've created to have inclusive leadership so that thoughts can be from the lower levels up and in ways that are non-threatening. So we're not trying to, it's not like, this is the other thing. It's not like a black and white world.
Yeah.
Right. We have to recognize people make mistakes. I even recognize that in this circumstance. Yes. As I said in my presentation, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yes.
They have kind of shortchanged this whole topic for their own agenda, thinking that I would just disappear. But now it's I'm not disappearing. I'm committed to the top, obviously. And so they missed the big picture on what they were putting a roadblock for so many. And we need to break from that. We need to recognize people can make mistakes. We are all human, but we need to find ways to come back. Like right now in the bigger picture of this topic is the black and white world we live is very polarized. Mm-hmm. And to me, the secret is social intelligence skills to help get that bridge built so that we can empathize. That empathy could bring it back to a single table, but I don't know that that's possible at this point in this thing. But I'm just saying that those are the bigger picture ideas about moving from black and white.
Yes.
Is those EQ social intelligence skills that are needed to do so.
I think that's so healthy, right? To just build into these institutions, these power structures, humility. Like, hey, we know that, like, we're not expecting you to be infallible. You don't have to make perfect decisions. You can make mistakes, but you have to own up to them and be like, hey, or at least be accountable for them. in some way, right? But yeah, I think you're right. Like, again, I don't think these people that did this are bad people. These are people who got lost in the power struggle of this and they're so caught up in their own little universe that I probably didn't even consider the fact that this was destroying your reputation and like messing with your career, right?
I'm not sure about that part. I think that was pretty intentional.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm throwing a cookie out where it's not deserved, but I think my point is just that it's I like the idea of graciousness, right? And the idea of not painting people with one color and just being like, hey, recognize you are not your mistakes, but you do have to be accountable to them. You do have to be.
Yeah, it's a growing opportunity, right?
Totally. And that doesn't mean that you're going to lose your power. It does mean that this is an opportunity. This is the other thing. This is an opportunity for you to grow as a leader and become a better leader and a more inclusive leader and just become somebody that people will remember and not just forget about because you were a tyrant in your situation, right?
I think they'd see them as a better leader if they did that.
Of course they would, right? And people want to follow humility.
Yeah.
They want to follow humility. They don't want to follow bullies and people that think they know everything because that's exhausting and childish. Just like,
well, the forest sector was recognized as one of the most difficult sectors in Canada on this topic. Like, it's behind even mining, and I did mining stuff. So, and we have to recognize that positions of power come with a certain personality profile.
Totally.
And narcissistic tendencies reign supreme.
Yeah.
And that's where there is no empathy and there's no building empathy. Most people can build these social skills, but it's a clinical thing that narcissists don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes a need for that framework we talked about, the accountability framework.
Yes.
Because that's how you can kind of zero in on this person has done this not just once, but multiple times. And this is not acceptable. This isn't part of our culture. This isn't the person that we want representing our sector, our country, our company, or whatever it is, right? And so that, I think, is a pathway out of that mess to ensure that these folks are not impacting other human beings. Because I'm a very porous person, if I can say it that way, like very open. I have a lot of energy. If you meet me in person, that's the way I am. People gravitate to that. I've been often behind the screen, so people don't have that connection with me. But I feel like I would, can be in the room with some of these, what I call dark personalities, and I feel their anger. It's like across the table, you can feel it. And it's like, whew, that's heavy. So when something like this happens to someone like me, it's hard. That's no way to put it. So I have to learn about creating this support around me in knowing my energy and not expending it. Like, I've given a lot of ideas for free kind of thing. I've not just with this, but other areas. And I'm starting to realize I need to have more of a awareness about how I'm giving. A lot of people like to take.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just like to abuse you as they take. And that's that. They don't even care, right? So it depends on the personality profile of the person too. Totally. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, I appreciate that, because that's the hallmarks of a good person. Someone who like you've taken this horrible situation and tried to figure out how you can change to handle this better in some one way or another, right? You're trying to constantly innovate and change and be a better person, and you just hope the other side is doing the same thing, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't. Yeah, like you said,
can't assume that
narcissistic traits are So okay, we need to be creating new structures, and thank you, Kelly, for your openness and vulnerability in explaining all of this, because I can't imagine how difficult it must be to be vulnerable like this and share this with so many people. So without the ability to, let's say there's people at the bottom of the structure, the power structure, and they're not easily able to affect this accountability framework. So you have people who aren't, they're not necessarily directly able to affect that. I would like to hear from both of you, and Greg, we'll start with you, just to give Kelly a break.
I'm happy to jump in here.
What are your words of we'll say wisdom, words of motivation to get people to step out of their comfort zone and to try to affect change. Because I feel like, nobody wants to be stuck in the same situation. We want change. We want to move forward. We want to do this thing, but it's a big difference between wanting something and doing it, right? Like it's so how do we get people, convince people that, to embrace and seek out constant change? Because we know that, especially in the social landscape, that's always going to be the case. We're always going to be moving in that direction, or at least that's, ideally that's what we want.
Yeah. Well, to sort of help illustrate what I think is crucial for somebody who wants to affect change, I'm going to harken back to an episode I did with you, Matt, on big trees, and my drive to help preserve them, to create policies that will help preserve these trees. And when I speak to students at any of the post-secondary institutions, they ask almost that same question. They say, Greg, how do you keep going? What makes you driven to make these changes? And my simple answer is, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe that the goal you're seeking will be attained. You're going to hit adversity along the way. There's no doubt about that. But if you just stay true to your principles and belief, things change. Like society changes all the time. It's continually evolving, hopefully for the better. But it takes people that are dedicated to make that change and not be afraid of setbacks. They'll happen. In my quest for preserving big trees, I've been told by our executive to give it up. It's not going to happen. We don't need that. And 3 or 4 years later, they've done an about face and they see the value of it. They see how society has changed so that this is acceptable and this is what they want. So yeah, DEI is in that position now. It's in a vulnerable position. And I have to say that perhaps Donald Trump has given us a big boost in our drive by showing us that precariousness. And it's, Kelly and I were speaking earlier, and let's look to other areas. Let's look internationally, who can look back on North America and think, oh, we don't want to go down that path. We want to become a richer, healthier, more wholesome society. Yes. And that's what my belief is. So what keeps me going is the belief that I can affect change and I can influence those around me to join in affecting that change. So it's just belief and sense of purpose.
And you need that constant pressure though, right? Like you need that constant pressure to affect that change, to motivate that change, to make that change happen, even if it is slow. I just before we move on to Kelly, I just finished this small book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. And he talks about this concept of the politics of inevitability, and just basically explains it as we all get comfortable in that no matter what administration is in, no matter what political structure we're in, we're out of the 20th century. We're not dealing with world wars anymore. It's inevitable that our society is going to continue to go in this direction where freedom is more, inclusion is more, and justice is more, right? So we get comfortable and kind of complacent in our social and political pushes, right? And we kind of go, it's like, it doesn't matter who's there. It'll be fine. It's all going to be fine in the end. It doesn't matter, right? And he talks about how dangerous that viewpoint is, but how comfortable it is. It's so comfortable to be like, oh, it's not my responsibility. It's fine. No matter what happens, like the last 20 years, it's been fine. It all kind of heads in the same direction. And he's like, that is a pitfall that so many societies have fallen into. And for some reason, we think that in the 21st century, we're out of that because communication is so vast with the internet. But it really struck a chord with me, that concept of complacency and that the politics of inevitability and getting stuck in that idea that it's inevitable that society is going to get better. And it's like, absolutely not. Society can absolutely take a backwards turn. Without a doubt it can.
And faster than before because of the internet.
Because the rate of change can be so much faster. Absolutely. And so I think that, to your point, Greg, is that pressure, constant pressure, we can't get complacent and thinking that things are going to get better no matter what. We have to be involved. to make sure that society moves in the direction we want it to go, because it will turn on us if you let those tyrannical people, those narcissists, get into power. You let those people make the decisions they want and just assume that somebody up there has got your back and is going to take care of you. You're going to end up like all these other, fascist and authoritarian states, right?
Yeah.
And like this is a big jump to make from forestry to authority. But you get, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the point is we need pressure and we need everybody to be involved in it. And you can't be afraid to speak up and speak truth to power, like Kelly said. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say you can't afford to become complacent. Like I look back in history at an extreme example of that. The Weimar Republic in Germany after World War I. Economy was booming. They were culturally on a renaissance. And then we all know what happened when people thought things were just going great. Fascism rose and it plunged the entire world into a state of evil.
Yeah.
I don't think we're capable. I shouldn't say we're not capable of it these days.
Don't think happen. Like that, Greg. It could happen.
I know. But it just shows when you become complacent and happy with the status quo that everything looks great, it can turn on you.
Yeah.
On a dime.
Or you just don't know what's really going on behind the veil.
Yeah. And then it's too late after that. So
you have to hold people accountable. You got to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And be empowered with knowledge. That would be my answer to your question.
Okay.
Be educated, be informed, make educated decisions. And I would say, what can we do to help these guys at the lower end? I'd say, have this information at conferences. Ensure it's of topic. Ensure you have good people, a breadth of people representing the topic.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Kelly, the idea we touched on briefly before with our professional associations, and whether you're going for your RPF or your RFT, you have the whole series of modules to go through. And there is one on ethics and code of conduct. Why not embed training on DEI within that module?
Totally.
It's the perfect vehicle for that. And you're getting everybody that's entering the profession as a professional, they're going to be exposed to that and impact their way of thinking and looking at their colleagues.
I agree. And I think that like what we did with Free to Grow training wasn't to be like the most comprehensive thing. We only had so much money. We were only doing so much. In the end, I got left holding the bag on what the private sector guys didn't follow through on with their commitment on helping out with stuff. So, but I was committed to the work. So I moved it to a better level with e-learning techniques, and it's more dynamic. It's got a lot of engaging things in it, like Star Trek analogies and things that make it interesting for guys. But it really works.
Yeah,
I know some women that are interested in Star Trek too. So
yes, but yeah, the other thing to say when I have an idea for helping people on the day-to-day is that when you have your regular team meetings, as part of your agenda, take 5 minutes at the beginning and have a social intelligence share, an experience that you had. Yeah, like so maybe I was finding in my meetings this week that I kept getting overridden when I talked, and how I handled it was, so you kind of outline the problem and then outline the solution, and solution, the chair needs to understand that they have a role to play to ensure that even the quiet people have a voice. Mm-hmm. So instead of just bypassing them because they're not speaking up, make an intentional point of engaging them to, do you have something you'd like to offer? Those kinds of things are helpful for conversations where most people, like in a meeting, let's say of 10 people, there's usually a couple that are very dominant in their ideas, and people follow that dominant voice, not necessarily because they think it's their idea, but they don't get called upon for their ideas, and they're an introvert. They don't speak up.
It illustrates, Kelly, how it's so much easier for people to follow than to speak up and be the leader. And the majority of people like to follow. And if it's a negative message, they go down that dark path. So,
well, they don't even know if it's negative.
No, they don't know it until it's pointed out.
Nobody knew what was going on. They're like, we don't even know why, Kelly, but we just have to do it. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense. I thought you were going to be, independent enough, have your own agency enough to ask questions.
I like that idea a lot, though, Kelly. That's a great idea of making it a norm, like a cultural norm within your organization, to have these moments before a meeting of honesty, and where people aren't being called out, but it's like, hey, I've noticed this. I would like to work on this. And if everyone, the first couple times it might be hard. You might get some people taking it personally, but that conflict, if you can work through that, that's going to help you grow. And once everybody understands that that's going to happen, all of a sudden everyone's thinking about how they're treating people and what they're doing and how they're talking. And it's one of those things, right? Where I think if you can just make it part of the culture that, like, hey, we're going to hold each other accountable here in a very simple way, like, hey, you're cutting me off, or I wasn't able to share, or whatever.
Or you say a chair's role is to ensure he reaches out to the folks that are not speaking just as much as those are vocalizing things. That's sort of a role that the chair has to own.
Yeah.
And we make sure the chair is accountable to that role.
Yeah.
So another story would be like, oh, so-and-so was really short with me in a meeting, and that really pissed me off. And instead of kind of coming back angry, you say, you show empathy. And this could be a share in the meeting. Yeah, well, this guy really was a jerk. And instead of responding the same, I asked him, hey, is everything going okay in your life? Like, something else going on. Yeah, what's going on here?
Let's humanize this.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that's the kind of stuff that I think is the gold. And that's the social intelligence piece that I think bridges this divide. But we're talking about doing it in a context, within a sector, within a country, within a continent right now that you're swimming upstream. But is it the antidote? Yes, I would say it's the antidote.
Yeah.
And I think if you took the training and you read the next book, you will see that it's all this thing. It's all this stuff. It's all, to me, the things that we need to be doing to, as you say, humanize what's going on here.
And I think there's a critical mass as well, right? Where enough of the people that aren't in power start talking about this, like for Greg's example, right? Like your boss wasn't on board with the saving big trees, and then 5 years later, he's like, hey, the public has shifted, society shifted. It seems like that's something we want to do now. All of a sudden, it becomes a thing, right? It's because it hit some critical mass where the voices for saving big trees was louder than the other voices, right? And you couldn't ignore it anymore, or whatever it might be. So the same thing is true here, right? If there's enough people, like the mob has the power, right? The critical, once you hit that critical mass, once people start advocating for this openly and not being afraid to speak their mind, right?
Well, the challenge we have in this storyline that's different is that it's not just raising awareness for the topic, but there's now been an intentional act to push people away from taking the training, which I think is a detriment to individuals and to their company and to the sector, to something that's not even got the tools. And then to say it's kind of like we're doing stuff. Well, maybe they are. Maybe they're now creating something to do all that. But that's not the way you do it. Okay. You don't go intentionally undermining and pushing people away from tools that are valuable to make that change happen, so that when that time comes, as Greg's did, people are equipped to take a different stance.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as I've learned, it does come down to the psychology of the personalities that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And that's where you don't have foresight entirely. I mean, I was warned about one person, but I didn't know the extent to which people would operate so in such just a shocking way. I don't know how else to describe it.
I'm sorry that this happened to you, Kelly, but I appreciate your openness to come on here and tell your story and to try and offer these solutions and to be part of the solution, right? Not just pointing fingers, and not pointing fingers at all, really, just like telling your story. But so many people do just want to get the bad guy, right? I appreciate your take as, being able to stand here and be like, hey, this horrible thing happened. How do we make something good out of this?
Right.
What have I learned here that I can offer society to try and move us forward, right?
Exactly.
What is the lesson here? How can we move forward, and how can people be held accountable for making terrible decisions, right?
And what's the pathway like to that bridge? And that's what the next book's all about. It's going to explain a lot of that stuff and
what's that one
hopefully
going to
give
be
more
called?
Tools. It's called The Emboldened Warrior.
Okay.
Spearheading Social Intelligence in the Workplace.
Awesome.
And just for fun facts, my name actually means warrior. So, and if you think about spearheading, as I said to Greg, when you're spearing something, you're inevitably going to get some blood on you. So I think that has been a part of the journey. But there's lessons to be learned. It's so that others can take the baton of this, all this knowledge. The first book of Lead the Change, the training that I think is very valuable. I've been really humbled by the effectiveness of it for those that have taken it. And then the next book I know will have other things to offer people if they're genuine with wanting to make change in it, in a way that's not threatening or dry as toast.
Totally. Yeah. We need that. Yeah. And I'm going to link all the free to grow stuff and whatever resources that you want in the show notes. We'll link all that, the training and that kind of stuff, so people can check it out, right, and be a part of it.
Thanks, Matt.
And because we want movement in this sector, right? Because
we want people to be informed. We want people to be knowing what's.
Well, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
I agree.
Like up until I spoke with you, I was like, yeah, forestry's doing great. Like we're moving in. Things are good. They're good people that care, and that's still true. There's lots of good people that care. That's still very true. I still believe in this sector, but damn, there's a few people up there causing real problems and pushback for no apparent reason, and so let's take care of that.
And I would say hold on to your bootstraps, because right now, during this time of Trump, there's a whole backlash going on in this topic. So women who are in the sector, I would say, are probably getting some old stuff surfacing.
Yeah.
That they're thinking, like a lot of people in this space are like, oh my God, like it's just like this entire building that was in front of you with strength on this topic has just dropped. And so we have to stay strong in these headwinds. That's what I keep saying. We have to keep. I appreciate so much that you have interest and commitment to this topic, because that's what we need to do at this stage. We have tools that are effective. We need to disseminate them. We need to create the awareness and have them access this training. That would be a lot right now. And given that it's affordable, everyone should be saying, hey, I want to take this. If we want to make positive change out of our company, or we want to do this, it's going to help our bottom line, I want to take it, and then do something.
Let's
be a part of the
guys.
Solution, not the bystander. I'm not sure where it's going. I don't know what to do. You have something here. It's effective. You can take it on your phone.
Awesome.
But I'm just saying there's stuff we can be doing that we don't have to just sit there and go, oh God, this is horrible. We can actually do our little piece.
Yeah. For me, it's motivated by the fact that I have a 6-year-old daughter, right? And I'm watching her grow up in this world, and you're like, oh, damn. You'd think I'd be motivated by having a wife, but apparently it's a much bigger deal when you have progeny, and then you go, oh, huh. So, but yeah, like I think the cognitive dissonance in folks that have daughters that are just willing to just accept the fact that their children are going to be discriminated against because of their gender. It's like, what are you doing? Like, just be aware. I
want to be clear that there are some people that have good companies doing things. I don't want to be saying, I just want to make that statement.
Yeah.
No,
there are a lot of companies that we deal with out here that have strong DEI programs, and they're to be commended for it. And there are others.
And I commend those that stayed with Free to Grow, and when things were getting silly, so there are people out there that are, but it's not their full-time job, and they'd like to do it, I think, quietly right now because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them. And that's the other part of the problem with the story, is that they see what happened to me and they don't want that to happen to them.
Totally.
It's a typical bullying thing, right?
Yeah.
So you
get away with it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Kelly, that by you being you're showing people what can be done with somebody who's committed and passionate and just wants to stay the course, see this through. You've taken some pretty serious hits along the way. We've had some really intense conversations over the past while, and you're still committed to it. And that's what we need. And that will draw more and more people to become your allies.
Your
We need
accomplices.
to create that safe
Just kidding.
space.
Accomplices. Sorry, Matt. Yeah. It takes a while for this old dog to learn new tricks.
I want to commend you as well, Kelly, for your bravery and courage in doing this, because I think courage is the big one that people tend to. It's easier to not be courageous, right? It's easier to take it on the chin and move forward than it is to take it on the chin and speak out. So
I'll tell you why. You want to know why? Because I have I have a daughter. My son's got a girlfriend. She's fantastic. And I just look at these bright lights and I think like they don't understand yet, right? They're just 20 and 22 and they haven't quite faced all this. Although my daughter did have a harassment issue at her work. But it's for them. It's taken a ton of reflection and courage, especially with that cease and desist letter. I wasn't comfortable doing that, to be honest. And the response was a bullying response, which we expected, but it was necessary for my self.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I needed to stand up for me.
Yep.
And say enough. Now, whether they could stop, I can't say, but they had at least been told to stop. I didn't ask for anything else. I just said, just stop.
Please stop. Leave me alone.
Yeah, just leave me alone. Which I shouldn't. I know it's my own business, so the way it's been so, it's just not, there's other ways to solve problems. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Woo. Well, thank you to both of you for all of that. Nothing else needs to be said. I think that was a 2-hour conversation about the things that need to change again, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thanks for your interest in this, Matt, and allowing Kelly to speak about her experience. It's one that should be shared, and I think your listeners should find it an inspiration, and hopefully they'll reflect on what Kelly's had to say, and change will come about.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something and you've seen the depth to which this problem exists and how good people can fall victim to an infrastructure or a culture of disclusion. How we need to constantly, as Kelly says, speak truth to power if we want to change things. And I know I'm going to start practicing. I'm going to do what I can. I hope you can all do the same. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of this. Shoot me an email if you got any questions or concerns, YourForest Podcast@gmail.com, and I will get back to you. Other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take it easy.